know when it started, but at some point, I started calling the summer of 2017 the summer of two adapts. So on the one hand, you had my disabled peers at National Adapt protesting and chanting, even hosting die-ins day in and day out on Capitol Hill, in the halls of Congress, and senatorial offices all over the United States, fighting for basic health care rights. For disabled people, it's a matter of life and death, but I fundamentally believe that it's the people of ADAPT, of National ADAPT, that saved health care for everybody last summer. At the same time, 3 global brands decided that they were going to debut what they called adaptive clothing lines. I find the premise of adaptive to be a bit conflicted. They're adapting normal clothes for not normal people so that we can fit in. They're putting them in separate adaptive sections, but they're saying that everybody can use the products. It's like they're telling us, be like us over there. Anyway, one of these 3 global brands decided that they were going to debut or have a t-shirt that made a statement. And I thought it would be interesting if they took a statement from disability culture, using one of the National Adapt protest signs with a slogan such as, "Our existence is resistance," or "Nothing about us without us." I thought something bland could be effective as well. Maybe go get them. In all the statements that they could have made in the whole world, this global brand decided this is what they were going to put on a t-shirt. Be thankful, which, if you're disabled, you know, from what I've been able to glean, not a single disabled person was consulted, paid, or credited for any of these disabled lines, or these adaptive lines. They were made entirely for us. So, thank you. I decided to ask Greg Baratan of National Adapt, this is Greg, I had decided to ask him if National Adapt was the first ever disability self-advocacy group. So basically what I mean is FUBU, for us, by us. And this is what Greg had to say. So, in addition to DIA, People First, and NFB, there were a bunch of local disability-led community coalitions that popped up in the early 70s, led by people who had escaped institutions. Notice the word escaped institutions, because it's quite funny, not really, because this is how one of the 3 global brands decided they were going to market their line. The special needs community is no longer an institutional community. They're out living among us. They follow trends from music to social media to fashion. They want and deserve to dress like everyone else in their age groups, and now they can do it themselves. It is this disconnect between the work that disability advocates and scholars are doing to build a culture and the way that businesses profit off of reinforcing our stigmas. This is what I torture myself trying to reconcile through design every single day. But there's a large part of me that wants to rage at these brands because it's really frustrating to feel so unseen. But when I actually look back at my own journey, I can't help but relate. As Tina was saying, on March 30th of 2012, I woke up to a new body, though it took me falling out of bed to realize it. When I got out of the hospital, I needed eyeglasses and a cane, and it didn't take me long to start wondering why my eyeglasses were fashionable when my cane was not. This is how I discovered my passion for design, and so I cobbled together a world-class design education. But it wasn't just design that I needed to learn about, I also needed to understand disability. And as I started making friends with disability advocates and scholars, what I started to realize is that everything I thought I knew about disability was completely wrong. I didn't even know what disability was. So what's disability? Well, disability did not exist before industrialization. You would have a blind person, and you'd have somebody with cerebral palsy, and you would have somebody using a cane living in their community. But they weren't grouped together. They weren't a thing called disability. Once industrialization rolled around, it created this expectation that bodies could perform in these rote and mechanized ways. And because of that, there was suddenly a subset of bodies that could not contribute as the others could. So industry turned to doctors and philosophers at the time to diagnose these bodies as disabled, which quite literally meant unable to contribute. These bodies were then segregated and institutionalized, and they needed a means for survival, and thus the adoption of charity for disabled people. We now live in a post-industrialized era. 11% of our college population is disabled, and disability is an emerging $8 trillion market the size of China, and yet this model of disability still lives on. Industrialization created the medical model of disability, which states we are disabled by our bodies. I ascribe to the social model, which states we are disabled not by our bodies, but by the world around us. I like to think that that takes the pressure off of my body and it puts it onto you, designers. Hopefully one day, us designers. But it's as my friend Lawrence Carter Long likes to say, disability is no longer just a diagnosis, it's a community. And we are building a culture that is hell-bent on rejecting the norm. Disability isn't the only thing that came out of industrialization. So too did these ideas of norm and mass. And while we have much to contribute to tech and design and so many other fields, I do believe it is going to be us, disabled people, who finally dismantle norm and scale the individual. Last year, I went to a panel at South by Southwest. I was told it was going to be about phantom pain, which is of interest to me. When I arrived, I found out that it was actually called End of Disability. And I immediately started trembling. I would have reacted the same way if they had told me that it was end of LGBT or end of women or end of, you can use your imagination. But I don't think the panelists realized that they were telling me that they wanted to take my community away from me. Anyway, about halfway through the panel, the moderator took a walker to the paraplegic woman who had been sitting in her chair on the stage, and I started shaking my head because I knew it was coming. And lo and behold, with a little electronic stimulus, the woman suddenly magically stood and the audience clapped and gasped because, oh my God, it's the end of disability. I honestly thought she was going to fall off the stage. But here's the thing. At the end of the panel, as the room started to clear, 3 burly men came and approached the stage, and they lifted the woman in her chair off the stage because in all of their efforts to end disability, they forgot to account for her immediate needs. They forgot to request a ramp. Design for disability is so focused on fixing us that it's had the unfortunate effect of turning our needs into our identities. Design for disability assumes we must overcome, otherwise we're going to succumb to this terrible thing called disability. We can never just exist. The year before that panel, I was actually part of another panel at South by Southwest. It was an inclusion in tech panel. Before I went on stage, 3 black men took the stage, and they were saying that tech has made efforts to diversify, and while it's not happening fast enough, tech is slowly allowing for more black men in tech, and so we have to continue with this trend. Then after they went on stage, a group of lesbians went on stage, and they said that tech is making efforts to diversify, and while it's not happening fast enough, they are slowly making progress, and there are more lesbians in tech. And then disability takes the stage, and I say, yes, tech is making more efforts to diversify, but the things that they're bringing disabled people into are initiatives that actually aim to that actually aim to fix us. And so actually tech is de-diversifying us through our supposed inclusion. And this is our fight. My mentors, Liz DuPoy and Stephen Gilson, are disability design theorists out of the University of Maine. And they have adopted a statistical term called platykurtosis. So platy is flat, kurtic is curve. And so what platykurtosis does is it aims to extend the range of what we perceive as normal. So you have your bell curve, right? So what platykurtosis does is it takes the 2 ends of the curve and it pulls them and it lengthens them. And what that does is it extends the range of normal. But what that also does is because you've pulled the 2 ends, it decreases the height of the curve. So it decreases the amount that we feel pain when we deviate from the norm. So what happens is people come in and they say, oh, we want equality. We're going to pull that curve all the way. We're going to have a flat curve. But when you do that, you don't have any room for identity on the curve. It's a flat line. So what we're looking for is a perfectly platykurtic curve where everybody feels like they have a space on it and nobody feels pain when they deviate from the norm. And for me, this is the importance of culture, because through culture, we're finally able to realize and celebrate our identities. Talk about this way too much, but one of my favorite stories of 2016 was in The Atlantic. It was called How Subarus Became the Car for Lesbians. The story's hilarious. So first what happened was this group of advertisers in the United States realized that a lot of lesbians were buying Subarus. This is like late 80s, early 90s. So they decided they were going to go to Japan and they were going to tell Japan, we want to market to this group. But they knew that Japan wouldn't agree to lesbians, so they used the word gay because they knew it would be interpreted as happy. Japan said, this is great. Yes, you can do a campaign for happy people. And so what Subaru did is they put 2 lesbians in the front seat and a dog in the back, and they're like, we've got representation, we're going to get the lesbians. Lesbians weren't into it. As disabled people know, representation doesn't really work. So what they decided then to do is they were like, we're going to wink at our lesbian consumers. And so what they did is they created a perfectly normal car commercial, but as the car drove away, I don't know if you can see, but the license plate says Xena Lover. And this is how Subaru became the car for lesbians. They winked at their consumers. So what I fundamentally believe is that disability is actually looking for its cult brand, the one that is going to finally see us and wink at us. So how do you wink at disability? Well, I'll first start with what not to do. Don't do anything for us. It's not going to get anybody anywhere. Don't try and fix us. But we have a term in the disability community called inspiration porn, where what we believe is that everybody benefits but us by being inspired off of us. And so don't resort to this inspiration porn cliche. So what do? Well, here's how you wink at disability. You use your resources to elevate our voices. That's a wink. You work with us to reject the norm. That's a wink. But also, you allow us to critique your systems, because what I have learned is that when we're finally able to critique the systems that disable us, everybody involved stops seeing our bodies as the problem. So a lot of my advocacy is premised on giving voice to disabled people, and I find it a bit awkward because I'm going to be speaking for a friend who is perfectly capable of speaking for herself and is in the room right now. But my friend Shannon Finnegan, who this is her old stomping ground, she was working at an art exhibition space in Wassaic, New York. And what she started to realize is that she knew pretty quickly that she was having a hard time navigating the 7 flights of stairs. There was no elevator in this building. But she also started to realize that other people were coming to this art exhibition space, and they also weren't able to get upstairs to where these art pieces were. And so she found this spot on the ground floor, and she decided to create the Anti-Stairs Club Lounge. And the whole thing is hilarious. Like, she made a font out of stairs. And when you walk into the room, it says, the higher you climb, the harder you fall. Is that what it says? Yeah. I mean, but the best part is in order to access the Anti-Stairs Club Lounge, you actually have to go in and sign a contract at the front desk saying that you won't access any other parts of the space. So that's a wink. Baseball. I have this dream in life that I'm going to do something so ostensibly bold and prophetic that I'll have no other option but to do a Bautista bat flip. Some of you are going to know what that means. Some of you won't, hence the term insider baseball. Or a wink. So I discovered a profound love of baseball in 2012. I became a diehard Yankees fan as I adjusted to my newly disabled body. And I remember watching this game a few years ago where the Yankees were playing the Rays, and New York's 2 sort of most obnoxious commentators, Al Leiter and Michael Kay, were groaning on about how they would not wear the pitcher's padded cap because they were so ugly. And I get it, they look like a donut. And they were going on, and as they were talking about this, I was thinking to myself, yeah, but like this pitcher who's wearing this cap will never stop standing across the mound from a catcher who has a cage over his face. Stigma makes no sense. And as I was thinking this, like Chris Archer, who'd been pitching at the time, while Al Leiter and Michael Kay were groaning, suddenly gets plunked by a line drive. Stigma. Baseball was originally a sport that was played with 2 instruments, a bat and a ball. Until the early 1900s, when there was a catcher who had been in the outfield, he caught a fly ball and broke his hand. And he wanted to play the following week, but he didn't want his friends to make fun of him. And so he went out into his barn and he found a piece of beautifully tanned leather that matched his hand, and he wrapped it in it. And I can't help but think that the aesthetic of the game that I so love was created by the stigma of the first player to ever wear a mitt. So I'm going to bounce around a little bit here, so I hope you'll bear with me. A few years ago, I created an organization called the Inclusive Fashion and Design Collective. I chose the word inclusive for a really embarrassing reason. I'm a tomboy, and I wear boxer briefs. And on this one particular day, I was ordering some boxer briefs online, but the men's were too big, so I had to order the boys' sizes. And when I received the email after the order, it said, "Congratulations, your big boy undies are on its way." So I canceled the order. But it was then that I realized that I didn't want to just pigeonhole myself into disability because there were so many things I needed. And so inclusive just seemed to fit until it didn't. Over the past few years, I've developed a profound distaste for what I call euphemistic design terms. Inclusive design doesn't mean inclusive, not in the way I had intended, sort of meaning a variety of approaches. Inclusive has become a way to talk around disability because nobody wants to say the word disability. My experience of inclusive design is one where my disabled friends and I are excluded from the conversation, and when we are finally able to contribute, we are not credited for our contributions. The same can be said of, I think, adaptive and accessible, universal, and even human-centered at times. When is it that you're using it to say something broader, and when is it that you're just using it because you don't want to use the word disability? People do have such a hard time using the word disability that they come up with these strange semantic terms such as differently abled or special needs. And to be totally honest, they make me want to scream. My friend Lawrence Carter-Long created the Say the Word campaign to say the word disability because every time you talk around it, you increase the stigma of the word and the identity that we're so proud of. So, still bouncing around. I don't know if you've ever noticed, but there is one area of sport that has never been branded. There's no logo, there's no aesthetic, there's no nothing. It's 3 simple words, the disabled list, and I love it. I love it so much that I decided to use it. I was talking to Tina maybe 6 months ago, and I was telling her about some of my disabled friends, but I was also telling her that brands don't really know where to find us, and Tina said, well, you should curate your very own list of creative disabled people, and so I did. I created my very own disabled list. And it's been such a powerful experience that I ended up actually rebranding my entire organization to the disabled list. We debuted our first program just 2 days ago at SY Partners, sponsored by AARP. I have to shout out because not many brands are doing WITH, and these two really are. What WITH is it's a fellowship. And what we're going to do is we're going to partner the top creative disabled talent in New York City with the top design studios it's a 3-month fellowship. What I have learned is that disabled people are the original life hackers. We sort of develop an intuitive creativity because we're forced to navigate a world that isn't built for our bodies. And so what WITH is going to do is it's going to start facilitating a process of designing with, because what I've learned is that when you design for disability, you do focus on accessibility, but designing with disability will incorporate accessibility into a much larger conversation. So if you're interested in learning more about WITH, applications go live on Monday, and I would so love to hear from you. If that feels like too much of a commitment right now, I will leave you with this, which is whatever you do, please don't commit to disability, commit to disabled people. Thank you.